Sometimes people think they know your worth just by looking at you. On the day of my daughter's wedding, I was laughed at, mocked, and humiliated in front of hundreds of guests. They called me poor. But what they didn't realize was I was hiding something that would shake their world. And when the truth finally came out, silence fell over the entire hall. This is the story of how one moment of arrogance turned into the greatest shock of their lives. I woke up that morning with tears in my eyes, happy tears. My little girl was getting married. The house was buzzing with laughter, relatives running around, makeup, flowers, jewelry, chaos, but beautiful chaos. When I saw my daughter in her bridal dress, my heart skipped a beat. She's not a little girl anymore, I whispered to myself. I wanted that day to be perfect. I wanted nothing to spoil her smile. But life had other plans. The groom's family walked in with expensive clothes, jewelry sparkling, their heads held high. I greeted them warmly, but I noticed it immediately. The smirks, the glances at my shoes, my suit. I brushed it off, but then I heard it. The groom's mother whispering to her friend, "Look at him. He looks so plain. I guess money really doesn't run in their bloodline." They laughed. My chest tightened, my fist curled, but I forced a smile, telling myself, ignore it, for her sake, for my daughter. The ceremony moved along. Everyone was clapping, eating, dancing. But when it came time for speeches, the mask slipped completely. The groom's father, holding the mic, smirked and said loudly, "Our son has always been surrounded by wealth. He deserves luxury. But love, well, love doesn't cost much. Hopefully our new bride will adjust to a modest lifestyle." Laughter erupted. Some guests tried to hide it, others didn't bother. I looked at my daughter. She was smiling, but I saw it. Her trembling lips, her eyes filling with tears. She looked at me as if to say, "Dad, are we really less than them?" That broke me. I need you to understand something. All my life, I lived simply. Ordinary clothes, ordinary house, no flashy cars. But behind that simplicity was a truth I had hidden for decades. I had built companies, invested in real estate, grown businesses silently. My net worth, over $68 million. But I never told anyone, not even my daughter, because I didn't want my children growing up spoiled, arrogant, or entitled. I wanted them to know values, not numbers. Yet at that moment, as my daughter stood there being humiliated, I realized silence was no longer strength. It was weakness.
I stood up. The laughter died down. All eyes turned to me. I took the microphone and said slowly, "Tonight, my family has been mocked. My daughter has been disrespected. And I remained quiet, thinking it was best. But if I stay quiet now, this insult will follow her for the rest of her life, and that I cannot allow." I reached into my jacket and pulled out a folder. It wasn't just papers, it was years of my life. Property deeds, company shares, bank statements. I handed them to my daughter and her husband. At first, the groom chuckled. He thought I was bluffing. But as he flicked the pages, his smile vanished. His hands began to shake. He whispered, almost in disbelief, $68 million? The hall went silent. The very people who laughed at me were frozen. The groom's mother turned pale, her arrogant posture collapsing. The father who mocked me earlier, he stared at the floor, unable to meet my eyes. I looked at them steady and calm and said, "You measured my worth by my suit, my shoes, and my silence. But you forgot, respect costs nothing, and without respect, All your money means nothing." Applause broke out, but louder than the applause was the silence of those who had mocked me.
My daughter's tears flowed freely now. But this time, they weren't tears of shame. They were tears of pride. She grabbed my hand tightly, her voice trembling. "Dad, I had no idea." I smiled and whispered, "Today isn't just your wedding, my love. Today is the day you learn that your worth can never be defined by others." That night, everything changed. The groom's family could never look at me the same way again. But I didn't care about their fear or their sudden respect. What mattered was that my daughter knew. Her family was never less. She was never less. And to everyone watching this, remember, never judge someone by their clothes, their house, or their silence. Because sometimes, the richest person in the room is the one you least expect. The room had settled after the initial tension, but my father's calm eyes scanned the smug faces of my fiancé's family. They thought they had him figured out, just a quiet, simple man with no power. Little did they know he had been waiting for this moment all along. I could feel my heart racing as I watched him walk towards the group, his smile polite, almost too calm. Everyone assumed he was harmless, still underestimating him. But the air shifted subtly, like a storm about to break. I knew something big was coming. During the speeches, my father dropped subtle hints of his accomplishments, a casual mention of a successful investment here, a clever business decision there. My fiancé's family chuckled dismissively, thinking it irrelevant. But the guests around us leaned in, sensing the tension, their curiosity growing with every word. I noticed it too, a quiet pride shining in my father's eyes. Then it happened. My father asked for the floor to speak. He didn't shout, he didn't brag, but the documents he revealed, legal papers, property portfolios, and business records, spoke louder than any insult ever could. Gasps echoed across the room. My fiancé's family, once so confident, now looked pale and flustered. "You see," my father said, his voice steady and commanding, "today isn't about money. It's about respect. Judging someone by appearances is a mistake you will never forget." My fiancé's eyes filled with tears of pride, and I couldn't help but hug him. The smug smirks that had filled the room moments ago had vanished. Some tried to argue back, but my father's calm reasoning and undeniable proof left them speechless. As the tension faded, the wedding resumed, but everything had changed. Guests whispered among themselves, amazed at the twist of events. My father had quietly turned the tables, and the atmosphere was now filled with respect, awe, and celebration. Even my fiancé's family had to acknowledge the truth. They had misjudged us. I clung to my father's side, feeling immense gratitude. Today was a lesson, a dramatic reminder that appearances can be deceiving, and humility often hides the greatest power. But as the music played and laughter returned to the hall, I couldn't shake the feeling that the story wasn't over. Someone, somewhere, was still planning their next move. And in that moment, I realized this was only the beginning. Even after my father's revelation, the room buzzed with whispers and subtle tension. I could feel every eye on us, some filled with admiration, others with resentment. My fiancé squeezed my hand, silently telling me he was proud, but I could sense his worry too. The question lingered, would they ever forgive the embarrassment? Suddenly, my brother-in-law, who had been quietly observing, leaned forward with a sly smirk. "Do you really think this changes anything?" he asked, voice dripping with arrogance. I held my breath, knowing this was the moment he would try to strike back. My father's eyes met his, calm yet piercing. "It does," he said simply,
because truth always has its way of exposing lies, and some lessons you can't unlearn. The tension in the room thickened. The smirk vanished, replaced by a nervous twitch that everyone else noticed. The next hour was a series of subtle power plays. Guests exchanged glances, quietly choosing sides. Some whispered about my father's business acumen, others about my fiancé's quiet confidence. Every conversation seemed layered with suspense, as if each guest held a secret that could explode at any moment. Meanwhile, I stepped outside for a breath of fresh air, only to find my fiancé standing under the garden lights. His face reflected a mix of relief and concern. "This isn't over, is it?" he murmured. I shook my head. "Not by a long shot," I admitted. We knew this was a battle of wits and patience, not anger or force. Back inside, my father had subtly gathered a few allies, guests who respected him and were quietly helping maintain order. Together, they began steering the conversations, turning uncomfortable interrogations into polite discussions. My fiancé's family, realizing they were outmaneuvered, began retreating into their chairs, their confidence slipping further with every passing minute. Then came the unexpected twist. The wedding planner, who had been quietly managing logistics, whispered something to my father. He nodded, a small grin forming, and asked the entire hall to follow him to the terrace. I was puzzled. What could he possibly have planned next? As we stepped onto the terrace, the city lights twinkled below. My father raised a toast, not just to our wedding, but to honesty, resilience, and courage. Some families think power comes from wealth alone, but true strength is in integrity, in standing tall when everyone doubts you. The hall erupted in applause. Even some of my fiancé's relatives clapped, albeit reluctantly. The rest of the evening became a delicate dance of respect, subtle intimidation, and silent victories. I noticed a few guests exchanging notes, whispering about the unexpected twists they had just witnessed. Every corner held a mini-drama, a conversation here, a nervous glance there, a small victory for truth unfolding slowly. By the end of the night, I realized something profound. This wedding wasn't just a celebration of love. It was a battlefield where respect, patience, and strategy had won over arrogance and deceit. And as my father walked me back inside, he whispered, "Remember, the story isn't over. Some people never forget being exposed." That night, I lay awake thinking about every smile, every smirk, and every gasp. I knew this wouldn't be the last challenge, but I also knew we were ready. The game had just begun.